What is going on YouTube? Joe here with Culination Media and welcome to my first team building guide. Today we'll be taking a look at the process of building a team and I'll be guiding you through my process as we create an example team. There are several different ways of approaching a team and by far the easiest and most reliable for those still trying to get the hang of things is balance. Smogon's UU tier is also one of the more balanced metas at the moment, so that's what we'll be using this time. As always, all references that are used in this video will be linked in the description below. Before starting to actually build a team, it's important to do your research. You need to be familiar with the format you're playing and at least have an idea of what you're going to be going up against in order to prepare your team. Since we're using UU in our example, we can head to Smogon's website to do some digging. We can see a complete tier listing with every Pokemon in the tier, and we can head to the forums to read about trends in the current meta. But perhaps even more useful than that is the usage stats for the previous month. What are people using the most? If you know what is commonly seen on the ladder, you can make sure your team has the appropriate answers. For example, looking at just the top 25 tells us a lot. Galvantula is high on the list, meaning Sticky Web is something we'll see a lot. Having hazard control in Defog or Rapid Spin will be important, and it also gives a solid reason to see things like Blastoise and Fortress with high numbers here. For now though, we can just take a glance and come back to this once our team is built. After we're done, we'll have to adjust our team if several of the top used Pokemon severely hamper our team. So let's get started. One of the first steps to get us started will be to pick a Pokemon to build around. So I'm going to pick Dragalge. I've used it as a defensive Pokemon in the past, but I'm looking to try something a little bit different this time, so I want to make it offensive. A wall breaking set sounds like something that could work really well, especially because of its ability, Adaptability, which increases its stab multiplier from 1.5 to 2.0. Because of this, we're going to give Dragalge Choice Specs, which gives it an extra 1.5 times boost on its attacks. Poison Touch and Poison Point are also viable, but are more defensive abilities, so we'll pass on those for now. The first thing we'll want to select when it comes to our moves is our stabs. And after looking through the list, we can see that our main options are Sludge Bomb, Sludge Wave, Draco Meteor, and Dragon Pulse. Draco Meteor is by far Dragalge's strongest attack and hits like a nuke with Choice Specs and Adaptability. The choice between Sludge Bomb and Sludge Wave is a matter of preference. The 5 base power difference between the two is negligible, but Sludge Bomb has a high 30% chance to poison the target. However, Chestnut's bulletproof ability makes it immune to this move, and for this reason, I'm going to go with Sludge Wave instead. Now for our final two move slots. Focus Blast is a great coverage move because it hits Steel types super effectively, which are otherwise either immune or resist to our other stab moves. It'll be useful for hitting things like Mega Aggron trying to switch in. The last move has several options. Hydro Pump will do major damage to ground types like Hippowdon, but they already take a lot of damage from Draco Meteor. Hidden Power Fire also OHKOs Fortress, but that's nearly its only use. Dragon Pulse is a great secondary dragon move that won't lower our special attack as well. But since Dragalge is so powerful, it will force your opponent to switch almost every time it comes in, meaning you get a free turn. For this reason, Toxic Spikes is a great choice to help weaken teams. It may seem kind of strange at first on an offensive Pokemon that's choiced, but it will often help you whittle Pokemon into a range where you can OHKO them later on. One final thing to note is that if HP Fire is used, because of the mechanics, you need to have 30 IVs in speed in order to get it. So it could impact your EV spread if you decide to run a certain amount of speed to outspeed specific Pokemon or certain speed tiers. Next up is the EV spread. I'm going to stray slightly from the standard setup of 252 HP and 252 special attack in order to help our case against specific Pokemon. Even though Dragalge is very slow with its base 44 speed, we can run a little bit of speed investment to outspeed the standard relaxed-natured Swampert, which is not only a fairly common Pokemon, but a nuisance to Dragalge with its Stab, Earthquake, and ability to set up Stealth Rock. The spread it usually runs is 140 speed, so we can give ourselves just enough to outrun it with 68 speed EVs while still keeping a modest nature to hit as hard as possible. This is important because this means we can hit it with a Draco Meteor before it dishes out major damage with Earthquake. With a little bit of prior damage, we can actually OHKO it. This setup will allow us to outrun Mega Ampharos that have a lot of HP investment as well, and we can OHKO it before it can hit us with Dragon Pulse. The rest of our EV investment will go into our special attack and HP. As a side note, this is a great example of how important speed can be. it's important to have an understanding of the speed tier each of your Pokemon fall into, as well as its nature and investment and how that impacts what it can do because of it. Now we can start building around Dragalge by adding teammates that synergize well with it defensively. The best way to do this is to add Pokemon that have typings that resist Dragalge's weaknesses of Dragon, Psychic, Ice, and Ground. It's a two-way street, of course, so having Dragalge cover our other Pokemon's weaknesses is just as valuable. At the same time, we need to be thinking of things that are necessary for every team. We should have some type of hazard like Stealth Rock, as well as a method of removing hazards like Rapid Spin or Defog. With this in mind, we're going to add Empoleon to the team. Its Steel and Water typing allows it to resist all of Dragalge's weaknesses except for Ground. On the other hand, Dragalge resists Empoleon's weaknesses to Fighting and Electric, which is great. They share a weakness to ground types, unfortunately, so we'll have to remember to compensate for this later on with other team members. This will be a defensive Empoleon, so we'll give it leftovers because it's the only form of recovery available for it. We'll give it Defog to remove hazards from the field and Stealth Rock so it can set up its own hazards as well. Scald is the stab of choice for defensive water types because it has a decent base power of 80, perfect accuracy, and a nifty 30% chance to burn its target. Several options are open to us for the final slot. Protect lets Empoleon scout for opposing choice Pokemon and gain more leftovers recovery, while Ice Beam hits grass types that might want to try to switch in. Toxic, on the other hand, scores residual damage on bulkier Pokemon. The reason we'll want to pass on Flash Cannon despite being Stab is because it has relatively bad coverage, and since we are defensive, it won't be doing much damage to the Pokemon we'd want it to hit in the first place, like Florges. We can fulfill another need for the team though by adding Roar. This allows us to phase out Pokemon that try to set up on the team. Going back to the usage statistics, knowing that Calm Mind Suicune is a huge and common threat in the tier, using Empoleon's resistance to water to phase it out gives a helpful and fairly reliable check to it. This type of Empoleon functions best as a specially defensive wall because it is neutral or resistant to common special attacks like Psychic, Flamethrower, and Shadow Ball, while being weak to common physical attacks like Earthquake and Close Combat. So, we'll give our Empoleon max HP and max special defense to perform to the best of its abilities. It's worth noting that 248 HP EVs can be used to give it an odd HP number, which allows it to take slightly less from passive damage things like Stealth Rock. The leftover EVs can be placed anywhere but attack, and the IVs for its attack stat should be reduced to 0 to decrease damage from foul play. A Calm Nature will further help Empoleon take special attacks without lowering a stat that it needs. Torrent is the best choice as its ability since Defiant only affects physical attackers anyway, and it can be useful for increasing the power of Scald at low HP. Now we can look for a physically defensive Pokemon to complement what we have so far. Since the only weakness our two Pokemon share at this point is Ground, we should look for a Pokemon that either resists it or is completely immune to it altogether. As such, Gligar turns out to be a great choice. It's only weak to Water and Ice, both of which are resisted by Empoleon, and it is immune to Ground-type moves. It's also immune to Electric and resistant to Fighting-type attacks that Empoleon does not like. This means we have some great synergy going on. If you plan on using Defog on Gligar, it should be noted that it has to be used with the Hypercutter ability for legality reasons. Since Empoleon already has Defog, we can give Gligar immunity, which makes it unaffected by poison and toxic status. Eviolite is the item of choice because Gligar is an NFE or not fully evolved Pokemon. Eviolite boosts its defenses by 1.5 times on both sides. Earthquake is the only stab Gligar needs, and Roost is a great reliable recovery move to regain health. Defog and Stealth Rock aren't needed since Empoleon has that department taken care of already. Knockoff is a solid utility move to remove the Eviolite of other Gligar and leftovers on bulky Pokemon like Florges. But we're going to go with Toxic because the team could really use a way to deal residual damage to opposing bulky Pokemon when Dragalge hasn't set up Toxic Spikes. U-Turn takes the final slot because of Gligar's speed. Since it's defensive and slow, it will get outsped, be able to take a hit, and then switch into a teammate that will be spared the damage. It's also useful for when the opponent switches, so we can keep momentum on our side. The EVs here can be pretty straightforward, with 248 in HP for an odd number, max defense, and the leftover in special defense. An Impish Nature increases physical defense while lowering our useless special attack. Now that we have a defensive core and a wall breaker with solid synergy, we can move on. The team at a glance is extremely slow, lacking a sweeper, priority moves, and a powerful physical attacker. We can remedy all of these issues in one Pokemon just by choosing Lucario, so that's what we'll do. This will add a third ground weakness, unfortunately, so we need to make sure we add another resistance or immunity later on. Lucario is a versatile Pokemon with the ability to attack from the special and physical sides, but we're going physical here because of our team's needs. Justified is a great ability for physical Lucario because it gives him an attack boost if he gets hit with a dark type attack like Knockoff, which he resists anyway. Steadfast is a better choice for special variants. To fill the sweeper role, we can give Lucario Swords Dance as a boosting move. Close Combat is the stab of choice because it is perfectly accurate with a high base 120 power. Steel Stab with Iron Tail can be used, but it's really only useful for Florges in UU, and it has bad accuracy. Extreme Speed has higher priority than most other priority attacks, meaning it will go before moves like Mach Punch, even if the opponent is faster. It also has a great base power of 80. The last slot has several options. Ice Punch is the only way that this set isn't walled by Gligar. Earthquake, meanwhile, hits things like Nidoking and Nidoqueen pretty hard. But we're going to go with Crunch for the ghost types that would be immune to our other two attacking moves. It's powerful enough to hit the very common Chandelure, and even Oko's defensive Slowking after hazards, which is gaining popularity in the tier. Life Orb is the item of choice because the extra damage is necessary to secure important KOs, and the recoil doesn't bother Lucario much since it is frail to begin with. The EV spread is pretty straightforward and standard with max attack and max speed, with the remaining 4 being able to go anywhere but HP, since keeping our HP at an odd number actually slightly decreases the recoil taken from Life Orb. And Adamant Nature is chosen to increase Lucario's ability to knock out faster things with extreme speed and get more damage on slower Pokemon with Close Combat and Crunch. Most balanced teams should be carrying a Choice Scarf user, as its immediate speed boost is often a saving grace if an opponent has set up or is simply packing an extremely fast Pokemon like Aerodactyl. As mentioned earlier, we also should be looking for another Pokemon with a ground immunity or resistance to help alleviate the team's weakness. Rotom-H is a great candidate because of its usually average speed, levitate ability, and access to moves that work well on choice users like Volt Switch and Trick. Volt Switch helps Rotom gain momentum, while Thunderbolt is a more powerful stab move and doesn't force it to switch. Overheat is its most powerful stab move and is essential for OHKOing the common Fortress, assuming Sturdy is broken of course. Will-O-Wisp and Thunder Wave can be used in the last slot for a quick status on things like Salamence or Alakazam, but we're going to go with Trick. This allows Rotom to cripple things like Snorlax by locking them into setup moves like Curse. Max Speed and Max Special Attack are given for investment, and as always an odd HP number is especially important because of Rotom's weakness to Stealth Rock. Zero IVs in attack ensure minimal damage from foul play, and a Timid Nature is used over Modest so that we can always outpace things like Mega Beedrill and Mega Aerodactyl. The slot for the last Pokemon can be filled by many things, since this team has plenty of balance even without a final member. One thing the team does lack, however, is a Cleric to remove status conditions. And while most of the team is immune to poison, many of them are susceptible to paralysis and burn, so we're going to add Vaporeon to the team. Despite it sharing water typing with Empoleon, the only weakness the two have in common is Electric, which is resisted by Dragalge and Rotom, while Gligar is immune. Water Absorb is the ability of choice to be able to switch into things like Suicune's Scald if necessary. Heal Bell will remove all status from the team, while Wish potentially allows Vaporeon to pass very large wishes thanks to its high HP stat. Protect lets Vaporeon recover using its own wishes, and Scout for choice moves as well. Scald is the stab of choice, as always. Other viable moves that could be included are Roar for phasing, Haze for removing boosts, Ice Beam for grass types, Toxic for residual damage, and Baton Pass for letting Vaporeon take a hit instead of a potential Wish receiver. Physically Defensive is a good choice for Vaporeon when paired with potential Scald burns, but we're going to do our best to make this a mixed defensive set. We can do this by sacrificing a little bit of HP since it doesn't need as much investment to begin with, and using the extra EVs to balance its defenses. Our team is now finished. Let's go back to the usage stats and look at the top 25 again and see if our team has switch-ins or answers to those threats. So let's go through the list. Dragalge beats Florges with Sludge Wave. Rotom-H can overheat Fortress, Gligar walls Crobat while Rotom outspeeds and KOs it with Thunderbolt. Donphan loses to Vaporeon one-on-one, and Empoleon can defog away its Stealth Rock. Chandelure is OHKO'd by Lucario's Crunch and loses to Empoleon anyway. Arcanine is walled by Gligar and loses to Vaporeon. Mega Beedrill is outsped by Rotom-H and loses to Overheat. Alakazam is picked off by Lucario's Extreme Speed after its sash is broken. Galvantula has a hard time damaging Gligar, is outsped by Rotom, and has its Sticky Web defogged by Empoleon. Gligar can take a hit from Salamence, and Empoleon can roar away Dragon Dance variants. Physical Infernape is walled by Gligar, while Dragalge resists Focus Blast and Fire Blast from the special variant and OHKOs with Draco Meteor. Darmanitan loses 1v1 against Vaporeon and Gligar. Hydreigon is a problem, but it can be picked off by Extreme Speed. Mega Blastoise easily gets worn down by Rotom-H, and Mega Aerodactyl is outsped and KO'd by Rotom's Thunderbolt. Empoleon gets OHKO'd by Lucario's Close Combat. Aggron takes several hits from the team, but it's nearly helpless against Gligar because Gligar is immune to both T-Wave and Toxic. Mienshao is OHKO'd by Dragalge, which resists U-Turn and High Jump Kick, and normal Swampert loses to Dragalge as a result of our speed investment, while the Mega variant has a hard time with Vaporeon. Espeon takes severe damage from Lucario's Extreme Speed and has a hard time damaging Empoleon in the first place. Umbreon, on the other hand, is OHKO'd by Lucario's Close Combat. Bulkier Crocodiles are OHKO'd by Lucario's Close Combat, while faster variants have a hard time with Vaporeon. Entei loses to Vaporeon one-on-one and can be handled by Gligar. Goodra is OHKO'd by Lucario's Close Combat after Stealth Rock. And lastly, most Suicune can't touch Vaporeon since they usually only carry Scald, and they can be phased out by Empoleon if they start to boost with Calm Mind. So, at a glance, our team has something to handle a majority of the most used Pokemon, which is a great sign. This doesn't guarantee anything, and there are many more threats than those listed in the top of the used stats, but it means we're on track with our team building. The next phase would be to test the team and begin to make adjustments based on our experience. This might include changing out a move so that we can hit a relevant threat to the team, or changing the EV spread of a Pokemon so that we can outspeed a threat or live a specific hit. For EV changes, the damage calculator is your best friend. This way you can calculate exactly how much bulk you need to have to take certain hits. For example, if it helps the team to have Gligar always live an Ice Beam from Nidoking, we can plug it into the calculator to see what investment would look like. As it turns out, standard Life Orb Nidoking will always have a chance to OHKO Gligar, even if it is fully specially defensive with a careful nature. After seeing this, we'd need to try to find a different way to check Nidoking if it was truly a problem to the team. Let's change the calc to Vaporeon since that's another common Pokemon to carry Ice Beam, but it's a lot weaker than Nidoking. The usual defensive Vaporeon will actually never be able to OHKO this Gligar, but let's say it's an offensive variant for argument's sake. We'll give it a modest nature. With max HP and a careful nature on Gligar, we can slowly increase the investment until the calc changes from having a chance to OHKO to a guaranteed to a KO. According to the calc, Gligar will always survive an Ice Beam from modest Vaporeon with a spread of 252 HP and 124 special defense. That means the rest can go into defense for overall bulk. It's very important to take everything into account here, as once we change even just a very small detail like adding a Life Orb over leftovers, Vaporeon will then have a chance to OHKO even with a timid nature, and Gligar having full investment. Make sure you double check each calculation that you do to ensure everything is considered. If you're serious about making a good team, this entire process will go through many phases of testing, changes, and even complete overhauls at times. Every meta changes as well, so adapting to the newer threats while retiring methods of dealing with obsolete ones is something that will come with time. Remember that no team is perfect, and in order to truly correct your weaknesses, you'll have to hit a few bumps along the way. There will always be new challenges like learning different playstyles such as hyper offense or trying to be successful with unorthodox sets. Sound team building is key, and knowledge is power. Use it to your advantage. And with that, we're gonna wrap up this guide. This video didn't come even close to touching on everything you may need to know, but rather it was an outline of how the process generally works. Specific questions, suggestions, and requests can be answered in the comment section or on Twitter as always. Make sure to let me know if there are any specific types of guides you'd like to see in the future, like a guide to using unorthodox sets, for example. And that'll be it for this time. If you guys enjoyed this video, do me a favor and give it a thumbs up, as that does help out a lot, and I will see you all next time. But until then, game on.